What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Sarah 71 here, bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Power Rangers Ninja Steel episode 17. Now, this episode is called The Adventures of Redbot, and it's a pretty good episode. The episode just came out yesterday. Unfortunately, I was not able to post it because I'm actually having a garage sale at my house this weekend. So during the time that I actually was having it, I was left alone, and I had to deal with like 30 people coming to me asking me for pricings on things. So I've been busy, but I have seen it now, and I'll tell you this much right now: the episode was pretty good. The episode focused obviously on Redbot, and it began with Redbot writing a blog that he's working on. This blog tells his adventures with the Power Rangers, and let's just say this much: it stretches the truth a bit, more like a lot. But we'll get into that. So for starters, he's writing this blog, and Levi comes over and notices him writing it. So he asks about what it is, and he wants to know more information about it or whatever. And so then what happens is that Redbot tells him one of the stories that he's been writing in his blog about his experience with the Rangers. So he mentions the about the time that the Rangers fought Trapsaw, and he mentions how in the story the Rangers were fighting him. He had Kudabots and everything, and for some reason they didn't bring their weapons. So it's like, oh no, how are we going to defeat Trapsaw? And then at that point we end up seeing Redbot flying in on his hover boots, landing down on the ground and saying, "Not to fear, I'll handle this." And suddenly he has these rocket fists that allow him to shoot out like rockets from his hands and explode the enemies and defeat them. And then what happens is that Levi's like, "Well, I don't think that's how it works. I think I recall what actually happened is that." And then he ends up, and then the flashback shows the Rangers using their weapons, doing their finishers, and defeating the monster, rather than Redbot coming at all. In fact, he wasn't even there. The other thing to note is that Redbot does not have rocket fists, so that was something probably added for that moment, but never was an actual thing, of course. I mean, that whole sequence was original footage. So anyway, what ends up happening from there is that Levi explains to Redbot that, doing stuff like that where you stretch the truth can create a lot of problems for yourself and everyone around you, and can make people not feel very good. And so Redbot feels bad that he's doing that to people, and he doesn't want to cause problems. But then the thing that makes him go from realizing that he shouldn't be doing this to wanting to do more of it is that suddenly Mick comes and says there's a guy that wants to speak to Redbot, the blogger, and so that leads to Redbot having to go and meet this guy. So Mick goes with him, and Mick basically just covers for him, basically saying that he's my experiment, and he's been making different things or whatever. And so what ends up happening is that Redbot talks to this guy who wants to make Redbot's blog into a best-selling book, and he's willing to make him famous, and he'll be so much more than any other robot if he signs to do this deal. So what happens is that this is overheard by Mick and Victor and Monty, and they decide that they want to manage Redbot, and they say that they want regular oil fill-ups and a couple of other things for Redbot, and Redbot's like, "Oh, that sounds pretty good." And then Monty hands him a huge packet of other requirements that would be needed to follow if Redbot were to sign the contract. And the guy's like, "I'm not willing to deal with that. Just take the offer that I gave you, and then we'll be good." And Redbot's like, "You know what? Sure." And Victor and Monty are like, "We accept." So then Redbot signs away on the signature, and then we end up seeing on the villain base that Cosmo really likes Redbot's blog, and he ends up showing all that appreciation for it. So then from there, Galvanox also sees it, and he's like, why is it that everyone loves Redbot's blog? And Catoclock shows up as well, who is the monster for the episode. And what ends up happening is that Catoclock wants to has a special ability which he ended up already using on Cosmo to cast a sort of spell on Cosmo's cane, and when he turned on a switch on the remote control, that activated an ability which leads to whoever's holding on to the object at the time that the button is pressed will become frozen in time. And in this case, Cosmo was holding on to his cane, and when he pressed the button, Cosmo was frozen in time. Now the thing is that if anyone else, doesn't matter who, as long as it's someone else, comes over and tries to take the cane out of his hand, then he will go back in time and be fine. Like, in other words, he'll start moving again. So shortly afterwards, I believe it's Galvanox removes the cane, and Galvanox tells Cosmo to go and start up with the Galaxy Warrior Dome or whatever. So then at that point, we end up seeing that Catoclock is going to use his ability to freeze the Rangers and steal their power stars. So then from there, what ends up happening is that they're going to have a book signing, and Redbot's going to talk about his book. So we end up seeing Redbot sitting with Victor and Monty, getting ready to talk to the public about his books, and they're also waiting for the books to show up because they're not there yet. So what ends up happening is that the Rangers also sit there, and Levi's not very happy because Redbot's really taking it as if he's doing the right thing when he's really not. And we also see Mary, the girl that Levi saved during the Levi Weston concert a while ago. And what happens is that, and if you remember, she was the biggest fan of Levi. So what ends up happening is that Redbot's really excited about everyone being there to get a copy of his book for free, and suddenly the guy that is making him a best-selling author comes over and says the books haven't shown up yet. So then at that point, they're curious as to what's holding up the books, and that's when the Rangers go out to figure it out, because Mick comes over to them and says, apparently there's some buzz cams outside, and you may want to look into it and see what's going on. So then at that point, the Rangers go out and end up having to deal with some Kudabots and also Catoclock. The Rangers fight the Kudabots, but Catoclock isn't seen right away. So what happens is that Catoclock ends up going into the van that had the books in it, because that's where the site of them being was, and ends up casting his ability on all of the books so that the Rangers would be frozen if they held the books, and then Catoclock could steal the Power Stars. So then at that point, what ends up happening is that Catoclock disappears with the Kudabots, and the Rangers are confused as to what was going on. So they're like, well, we'll figure it out later. So then they go up to the cab driver, to the guy that had all the books in his truck, and says, okay, you can go to the school now. And so the guy leaves, and at that point what happens is that the Rangers return back, assuming nothing really is going on, or at least they don't know what to assume, and they're handed books as well as everyone else. Now what also happens is that during that time, Redbot tells the story afterwards, because Redbot says, you know what, I'll tell you a story that isn't even in the book, and that might be something worth hearing about. So what he ends up telling them about is the time when there was the Levi Weston concert, and little Mary, what happened is that he ends up mentioning how in the flashback that at first Levi tried to save her from like the huge building that was gonna fall, a chunk of the building that was gonna fall on top of her, and then what happens is that Redbot pushes him away and then uses his rocket fist to break through the building that was falling. And then Victor and Monty tried to do their own interpretation of it, where Redbot pushes Levi, or the Gold Ranger, and then Victor and Monty push Redbot, and then they save her with Victor's laser eyes or something. And what happens is that since Mary's there, she's like, none of that is right. The Gold Ranger saved me. So then at that point she storms off, and they realize, she was the one that they were telling, so she must know. If you're dealing with someone who's right in front of you and you tell a false story, then how does that work? So then at that point she storms off with the book, and in the meantime the others are like, well, who are we supposed to believe? Well, are you lying, Redbot? And so then what happens is that everyone's getting really annoyed, and suddenly Cattle Clock says perfect timing. He presses the button, and then everyone, including the Rangers, is frozen in time. The only people that are not frozen are Redbot, and also a character that I forgot to mention, because early in the episode, Haley brings in Cody to sit by the building walkways or whatever, and ties them up. And so what happens is that Cody was there, and when Cattle Clock is about to steal the Power Stars, Cody pulls the leash from the banister and then goes to attack Cattle Clock, which Cattle Clock is a cat, gets scared of Cody, who's a dog, and runs away. In the meantime, Redbot ends up taking the books from each of the Rangers' hands and tells them that Cattle Clock froze time, apparently put a spell on the books so that if you held them, you would be frozen in time. So what was discussed is they realized that Mary left earlier and maybe she could be in danger. So what happens is that Levi and Redbot go after Mary to go and protect her and help her out. And in the meantime, the other 5 go to attack Cattle Clock, and Mick is left to remove the books from each of the civilians' hands so that they are not frozen in time. So Levi and Mick go after Mary, and suddenly there's a train that's coming where Mary is, because she's frozen in time near a train, and Levi knows that he isn't going to be able to make it in time, so then Redbot jumps off and uses his hover boots, which are a thing apparently, even though we hadn't seen them up until now. Yes, those are a real thing. As far as the rocket fist, there's no actual proof that those are a thing, but probably must be in some way, even though we've never seen them because they created them for that sequence or whatever. Anyway, he does save Mary, and Mary thanks him a lot for what he did. So then we end up seeing the Rangers fighting Cattle Clock. They end up attacking him, doing all sorts of different moves. They also use a bunch of their battle gear. They use their claw mode for their morphing weapons, and they also use the bow mode, and then they use their ninja swords to attack and destroy Cattle Clock, and then eventually he is gigantified. So then at that point we end up seeing something that we haven't seen in quite some time, which is for starters, we actually see the Rangers using their individual Zords, which we have seen that, but we also see the Tusk Zord used. Now the Tusk Zord hasn't been used in quite some time, and to make things even more interesting is that they also use the Rumble Tusk Megazord, which is the continuation of that, which is the full-on Megazord, which we haven't seen in a really long time either, because a lot of times as of late, it's been always the Ninja Steel Megazord, or the Ninja Steel Megazord and the Bull Rider Megazord, or it's the Ninja Fusion Megazord. So it's good to see that we're getting back to the auxiliary Zord combinations, because those do exist, and yet we don't really see them. So anyway, what ends up happening is that the is that the Rangers end up using the Robotel's Megazord, and they use the finishing move to destroy Cattle Clock, and the episode ends from there. Now, I forgot to also, not the episode ends there, that I also forgot to mention that what led to them destroying Cattle Clock was that his chest, where his clock was, they had to use the elemental charge to destroy it, but also what happens after they destroy Cow Clock is that we see them back at the school where everyone is not frozen, where everyone is not frozen anymore, except for 2. But we'll get to that. They all want to return the books because Redbot was lying, but then Redbot shows up and says he's sorry for what he did about not telling the truth and everything, and then Mary shows up and says, check the TV, and suddenly they see a news report about Redbot saving Mary, and Mary ends up telling Redbot, you may not be always a hero, but you're a hero when it counts. And that's a very sweet sentiment. And then from there, the Rangers end up asking, so what happened to Victor and Monty? And that's when Mick says, well, they weren't that good at being managers for Redbot, so instead I gave them another purpose, and I chose not to freeze them. I chose not to unfreeze them. So what they decided to do was use them as coat racks and stuff. Yeah. So that's about it. Alright episode. Not the best ever, but a pretty good episode, I would say overall. For a filler, I actually was pretty impressed, because fillers can range significantly from being really good to being kind of really bad. So I'm actually pretty impressed with what we got. I'd love to know your guys' opinions. Did you guys enjoy this episode? Are you looking forward to the next episode? Again, the show is very close to being over. There's like 3 more main episodes aside from like the Christmas special, which is not that important, but it's this time around it's actually somewhat important, which is very unusual to ever happen, because typically the holiday specials have like nothing to do with the show and usually aren't that good. I mean, they have to do with the show, but they don't expand in any way. This time it does, but it's like small but important, I guess. Anyway, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, tell you guys think. I love my guys' opinions. Please, and I hope to see you guys next time. So, telling you guys some crazy stuff going on, and goodbye, guys.